no political party today in Israel or in Palestine that really advocates studying the language of the other. That's not part of the agenda, because the thinking is that we will eventually separate, or that we want to separate, and that's, as I said, not really happening. So when we talk about challenges for a federal solution, of course, there are many. Before I get into details about the way I think it could happen, the book has 11 possible suggestions about a federal solution. There are many formats in the world. All kinds of different sorts of federal solutions have been tried. And I can't say that I know that there is one federal solution that will work. It'll have to come from both peoples. But I will say that that any federal solution would have to balance between, as I said, addressing symbolic needs and some kind of shared identity, which maybe I'll say something about at the end. So when we think about a federal solution, of course, we can think about an American-style federal solution with two states within like a New York and New Jersey kind of style solution. There are groups that are advocating that. I think that would probably be too radical for Israel, Palestine. At this point, it would be, for Israelis, I think it would be not feasible and not probably beyond what would be possible for us to actually, as I was speaking about, giving, or at least backtracking a little bit on the importance of sovereignty, but I think that would be too much. In other words, to degrade Israel from a nation state, from a sovereign nation state, to a one state between within a federal system, that would probably be, I think, not satisfactory for both sides, although that would seem a simple solution. Rav Hanan mentioned the Eretz Lekulam, the idea that some of you have heard about, the idea of two states, one homeland, a confederacy, a confederal solution. Confederal solution would be more in the lines of like the European Union, that's a confederacy. So two nation states within some kind of confederal arrangement. The disadvantage of confederal solutions usually is that, so you get the symbolism, you get the nation state, you get people, in that sense it's strong. The problem with confederal solutions is usually that they are easy to dissolve. And I think that the idea of building, you would want to have something where the glue and the binding between the two parts is actually strong enough so that it would not be easy to break up at the drop of a hat. So that's I would say, I'm just of course this could be discussed further, and I'm sure Emanuel will speak about the different solutions as well. But to me, that would be a problem with the confederal solution. Cantons I won't address because Emanuel will speak about it at length, I'm assuming. We can talk about different kind of autonomous communities within one state. In the book, my father's book, the solution that he advocated is actually, I think, probably not relevant anymore, which was the solution is to have a federal Jordan Palestine. So you would have that as a federal with two entities. Use one, Jordan and Palestine, and then Israel would be connected confederally to Jordan Palestine. That sounds like a nice solution. The only problem is I don't see how the Jordanians could be convinced to be brought into that solution. So I was saying that there are many ideas that could be, and every federal solution is slightly different. But the important thing is to shift the paradigm of separation and to move towards shared rule that has to be negotiated between both peoples. I think that there needs to be some kind of element of a shared identity. And I think that, you know, from discussions with people on roots, I think that in time we could move towards some kind of shared identity revolving around the idea of a Holy Land, the idea of attachments to this territory. Others I know have spoken about the Abrahamic connection. Different things can be spoken. The big challenge, of course, to federal solution, I would say there were two big federal challenges, and maybe I should conclude with with these. The one challenge is, of course, that the current situation, well, of course, violence is a challenge. I wasn't even thinking of mentioning that, but, you know, violence is perhaps the biggest challenge for the idea of shared rule. I mean, the idea that, of course, shared rule demands an amount of trust that we currently don't have among us, and that would take time to build. There's also the issue of political culture, which is, I think, essential. You know, Israel is a democracy. The Palestinian Authority has not had an election for many, many years, and I don't know when that's coming. So I don't think you could have a federal system that is based on one democratic entity and one non-democratic entity. You would have to go through some kind of process in which both entities share some form of political culture. So that would definitely be a challenge. And the other challenge is, of course, the premise that everybody is that the nations and many people in Israel are very much locked on the feeling that the two-state solution is really the only way that we could solve this. Each one, I think, from its own fears. Here in Israel, it's the demographic issue that troubles people. So there are many obstacles to be overcome in that sense. So I think I will conclude. I think that's enough as an introduction. I'm going to let Emanuel present his vision of federalism, and if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Gideon. So the questions will be afterwards, after Emanuel speaks. Emanuel.
Okay, hi guys. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Gideon, for your introduction. I'll share with you now my screen, which is a presentation of the federation that we propose. When I say we, hold it, I mean Aryeh Hess, who is really the original author of much of the ideology behind our federation system, and myself. We've been working at this for several years. I'm going to start going a little bit over the reality of the way it is now, why the two-state solution isn't any good. Then I'll explain to you what we need, what we think we need in some kind of arrangement, and then I'll go into the details of what we're actually proposing. And at the end, of course, we'll have a questions and answer session. So it's two states or what? Okay, that's the question. Everybody has been hung up pretty much on the two-state solution for many years, and it's become almost dogmatic. I'm going to show you the two states the way they should have looked like before Trump joined the fray. You see here the two states are separated. This is Israel, and this is the Palestinian state taken out. And you can see that this doesn't look like something which could be actually some stable two-state arrangement, okay? Other than the other things which are complicated. And then when Trump came in and he came up with the Trump proposal, it started to look like that, which the central elements hasn't much changed, but what has been made this thing much more difficult is the inclusion of many enclaves. There are about 15 Jewish enclaves in the Palestinian state. The Palestinian state here is in green. And these areas here along the Mediterranean and along the border with Egypt are pieces of land which have been given to the Palestinians in the proposal to make up for land that we have taken along the Jordan River and included in the state of Israel. But if you look at it, and if you look at the transportation arrangements, the tunnel between Gaza and the West Bank, and all kinds of special roads and tunnels between all the different areas, and inclusions and enclaves, anybody in his right mind, and Gideon was already talking about the reality on the ground, okay, as it is now, this is not something which can really live two states, okay? This is not a real arrangement. This is, I don't know what it is. I don't know. My feeling is that it was prepared in order to finally get rid of the two-state solution and go back to the original plan to give the Palestinians autonomy, because that's what they would basically end up with. They wouldn't have sovereignty in their own state. These borders, which we can see here, they're you know, the length of the borders to the Palestinian authorities is enormous, okay, is enormous. And the way Israel looks at the two-state solution, it looks at the Palestinians, we say Palestinians over there, we over here, and a big tall wall in the middle, okay, which is ridiculous. You look at the security implications are enormous. To make borders all along the divisions between Israel and the Palestinians is just not feasible. It would cost enormous amounts of money, and it wouldn't in the end give security, because the Palestinians inside those enclaves would be less than happy. So in addition, the economic situation of the Palestinians, who are completely dependent on Israel, 80% of the Palestinian economy depends on Israel, they would be in really poor condition if that separation would really take place, which would of course reflect on the security situation. The moment the economy is any good, the security is impacted with all that means. And it's our economy as well which suffers. You know, when Israel puts on the list the countries it does most trade with, Palestine isn't on the list, but Palestine is, the Palestinian Authority is about the fifth largest trade partner. Okay, we do about $5 billion worth of trade with Palestine, with the Palestinian Authority. Most of it, of course, Israeli exports. And if a border would come into being, that trade would suffer tremendously, and it would reflect mostly on the lower parts of the Israeli economy, the poorer industries, not the high-tech industries. So there's absolutely no good reason to go to two states, even if that was feasible. There's another issue which is very rarely discussed, and I think American Jews are very familiar with it, the issue of dual loyalty, or the accusation of dual loyalty. Okay, right now, the Palestinians in Israel proper, in Israel, they don't have a state of their own. Okay, they're accused of being a fifth column, but there is no other state they could be loyal to. If a Palestinian state would come into being, then that would be an issue for the Palestinians who live in Israel proper. We see here Muhammad Barakeh, who is a former member of Knesset in one of the nationalistic Arabic parties, and Raed Saleh, who is the head of the Islamic movement in the north, who are both Palestinian nationalists, and both of them are Israeli citizens. And they're loyal Israeli citizens, except for Raed, who is now going to go to jail for a year and a half, who he did a lot of incitement. But other than that, they don't have another state. If a Palestinian state would come into being, that would be an issue for the Arabs who live within Israel borders. So we're back to the question, two states or what? The question is, what now? We can continue with the status quo, which we believe is not reasonable under the circumstances. And we may look at annexation, at least partial annexation, which for some reason has been on a hold now because the Trump administration hasn't been able to decide. But it may come to fruition, and the implications of annexation could be apartheid. Apartheid meaning that we would end up with a considerable Palestinian population who would be disenfranchised. Not that that hasn't been the case for 53 years now in the West Bank, but it was temporary under the occupation. When we go through annexation, it will basically, that excuse won't be valid anymore, and we will have to deal with the apartheid accusation if we don't give full rights and citizenship to the Arabs, the Palestinians who are in the annexed areas. So what do we need in a solution or in an arrangement? I won't call it a solution, it's more of an arrangement, okay, a future arrangement. The first and the most important thing, critical, is political implementability. Okay, what I mean, here we're going to show you the distribution of Knesset seats in the Knesset. Blue is the right, red is the left. We need something which can get cross-the-board support. We don't want to end up with a situation with, like we were at Oslo, where we had 61 votes for the Oslo arrangement, for the Oslo agreement, and that didn't go through very well. We need the right and the left to be able to come together on this in a good way. So that's the first condition. Whatever we propose should be acceptable to the Palestinians. Okay, and when I mean acceptable, when I say acceptable to the Palestinians, I mean mainly to the Palestinian people, not necessarily their leadership. Okay, meaning that if we go to a federation, for example, the Palestinians would vote, and we would expect that most of them would vote in favor of such an arrangement. Nevertheless, I think it would be prudent for us to consider that whatever we propose we should be able to implement it unilaterally. I know that's not a good idea, and we really don't want to implement it unilaterally. But if the alternative is to stay with the status quo and not to implement because we can't find the leadership to go along, if the proposal can be implemented unilaterally, it should be considered. And that's what we actually think federation could be. We need international recognition. That almost goes without saying. We cannot be in a situation where whatever we end up with is something which will result in boycotts or sanctions or actions against Israel. Most of our GDP derives from foreign trade. We can't afford a situation where we are, where we would be put in a situation like South Africa was put in the 80s and 90s of the last century. So international recognition would be a requirement, which means that whatever we come up with has to adhere to international law and stick to human rights and civil rights and all that stuff which we're not exactly looking at now in the occupied Palestinian territories. Another issue is that whatever we come up with has to have immediate and considerable benefits for the Palestinians. The Palestinians are economically in a very, very poor situation. The GDP in Israel is approximately $40,000 per capita. The GDP in the Palestinian, occupied Palestinian territories is between 2,000 and 4,000, depends where and depends who's counting. So that's a gradient of 1 to 10, which is impossible to maintain. It's not reasonable to have two areas in immediate vicinity where you have such a huge gradient of economics. So that has to be a part of the program. Obviously, and very important, whatever we come up with has to safeguard Israel's security, which means we have to have control of the borders, and we have to be able to go wherever we need to go within the area of our sovereignty. it has to be acceptable, it should be acceptable to the neighbors. Okay, we don't want something where everybody around us says, oh, this won't go. Especially, of course, Jordan and Egypt, but even the Arab countries which are further away who have considerable Palestinian constituencies should also be in agreement. The refugee issue has to be addressed in a meaningful way. I'm going to come back to that later because it's a very critical issue. The way we look at it, first of all, we're not all of the same opinion within our own movement regarding the refugee issue. There are, you know, on both sides of, we are on both sides of the spectrum, or also, there are people who say that it has to be dealt with only those refugees who are in the area in Israel now and in the territories now should be dealt with, and everybody else should get restitution and so on. And there are others like me who think there should also be thoughts about limited immigration. I'll get back to that in the end, but it has to be addressed. We cannot just glance it off. Although I say that the priority has to be for the people who are living here now. That has to be the first priority. The refugees have to be dealt with, but not at first. And the last not least, what we need is we have to have a flexible approach, meaning that whatever we do will not preclude, for example, the two-state solution at the later stage, if that will become necessary or interesting for anybody, or a confederation that Gideon, we don't think a confederation is any good for many reasons. First of all, confederation is two states, and we can't get two states. So, let's not talk about it right now. I'll show you what we came up with. Okay. Okay. What are we talking about? Is we're talking about extending Israeli law to the West Bank. In other words, annexation. Okay, it's a legal issue whether you call it that or that, but the idea is the same: to put all of the West Bank under Israel's sovereignty and basically make one enlarged Israel from the Golan Heights to Eilat along the borders along the Jordan River, not including the Gaza Strip. Okay. Now, the Gaza Strip, not including Gaza Strip, obviously is a major issue, but it's critical to implementation. What I mean that if the Gaza Strip is part of the deal, then there is no political implementability. Okay, no Israeli Knesset will vote for a demographic situation which would be 50-50. Which is what the situation would be if Gaza would be included. So Gaza is not included in our approach. We can see here the Gaza Strip. I've discussed this issue extensively with people from Gaza, with Palestinians from the West Bank, with Palestinians in Israel. It's not as big an issue as it appears. In the initial reaction of, obviously, of the Palestinian Authority, people who are close to the Palestinian Authority is no. But when you tell them that we're talking about the Gaza, which would have a port and an airport and access, and the people could move and could go to the West Bank, it's a different issue. The population of Gaza is not the same as the West Bank population. Gaza has been a separate unit already for 15 years, and before that was a separate unit for a long time. So it's not a major issue in view of the alternatives. We would write a constitution for Israel. And when I say, well, you know, we were supposed to write a constitution already according to the Declaration of Independence in 1948, and it was always pushed aside. The constitution we would write now would be a different constitution. We wouldn't write a constitution for the Jews, which appears to be impossible at this time. We would write a constitution for a joint Palestinian-Israeli sovereignty, which means that the constitution would basically, the main issue of the constitution would be to protect the mutual rights and duties of Palestinians and Jews in that united land of Israel. And it would also be form the basis for the federation and outline the interaction of between the federal government and the federal units we're talking about. What we would, it would mean, of course, full citizenship for the Palestinians, for all the Palestinians who are in the sovereign territory of the federation. It wouldn't be immediate, but it would be over, a reasonable period of time, or 2 or 3 years or whatever. And whoever doesn't want to be a citizen would be a resident, like the situation now in East Jerusalem. But the idea is to make it quite clear that this is with an open heart, and not grudgingly, and with it's a different mindset altogether. It's just something different. And this is what it looks like. Okay, this is what our proposal looks like. This is a proposal which is based on the Swiss model to a large extent. We're talking about 30 federal units. There's nothing magic to the number. There are basically the main criteria for the cantons are, first of all, they have to be a solid majority, either Palestinian or Jewish. That's for stability, so you cannot change the majority status of a canton easily. And the number of cantons, the ratio between the Jewish cantons and the Palestinian cantons has to reflect the demographics. Okay, so if we have in this area that we are including here in the federation, the demographics are approximately 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 Jews, 1/3 Palestinians. So that's why we have 30 cantons. 20 of them, the blue ones, are Jewish majority, and the green ones are 10 Palestinian majority cantons in green. The purple ones here are is a Druze canton, okay, which is one canton separate into areas. And what you see here in gold is Jerusalem of gold, which is it should be a blue canton, but we thought, Jerusalem is Jerusalem. The cantons themselves, there is nothing particular to the borders of the cantons. Each canton is a conglomeration of existing municipal areas, of regional councils, local councils, cities, according to the borders today. And similarly, the ones in the Palestinian, the ones in the West Bank, the Palestinian areas are with according to borders that are current right now. We would include an upper house in the Knesset, and the upper house would represent the cantons. Each canton would send two representatives, regardless of the size of the canton. So we would add up. It would add to another 60 members of Knesset, and this would be a way to create stability and continuity in government. The critical issue on this is, even in the Declaration of Independence and already in the separation resolution of the United Nations, we were encouraged or asked to work towards the economic unity. The resolution, the UNGA 181 is a resolution for separation and economic unity, and also in the Declaration of Independence says we're supposed to work for economic unity. Everybody who looks at the land, who looks at the economies, knows that this country is one economic unit and it has to be united. That's going to cost a lot of money, but any businessman will tell you that the potential is huge and the investment will be worthwhile. We'll incur a dent in our GDP for several years, but after, I don't think it'll last more than 5 or 6 years, and we'll pretty be up to par with the Palestinian areas, because the two economies are to a large extent complementary. There's a relatively high education in the West Bank who have nothing to do. There was an article in The Economist a couple of years ago, which said that Israel's high-tech industry cannot expand except if it gets two populations involved, the Haredim and the Palestinians. So this is what we have to do. And there's another added value here in the need for investment. The need for investment means that the diaspora, our diaspora and also the Palestinian diaspora, can be engaged to help along with the economic unity. And that there's a foot in the door regarding the return of Palestinians according to some kind of scheme, because if Palestinian businessmen will want to return to help the Palestinian economy along within the federation, why should they not be allowed to return and become part? And this brings me back to the refugees. There will be in our website, on our website, you can see there's a quite extensive discussion of the issue. I think in the end, and don't quote me on this, these issues are very, very sensitive. But I think what can be a baseline for thinking is that both the law of return and the right of return are set aside, meaning that everybody knows we have a law of return and everybody knows that there is a right of return, but we're setting it aside. We're not looking at it. We know it's there. We respect it, but we design a normal immigration policy for a normal country. And what is a normal immigration policy for a normal country? A normal immigration policy says it can bring in people whose roots are in this country, okay? Both Jews and Palestinians, according to the needs of the country and according to certain economic principles. And in our situation, possibly to maintain the demographic ratio, but there are possibilities to do that. At this time, it's very, very difficult to discuss it. The emotional issues are much more problematic than the practical issues, but there are ways out of this. I think I've come pretty much to the end of my presentation, and we can all join and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And I'm be very happy to take questions now.
Okay, should return the screen to everyone so we can see people?
Okay.
Thank you very much, Emanuel. Before we go to the questions, I'm going to take the prerogative of asking a question, or perhaps another way to say it. I want to point out what I feel is a tension in the prose we heard from Emanuel, and I'd like to hear how he deals with that tension. So I'm going to quote a few things that either Emanuel said no, or I read on the website of the Federation movement. Mm-hmm. Number one, when we create this larger state, it's called extending Israeli law over the whole land. Israeli law. Mm-hmm. That's one point I want us to remember. Okay. And number two, in the cantons, there are 20 Jewish cantons and 10 Arab cantons. In other words, mm-hmm. it's primarily, it's Israeli, it's Jewish. Mm-hmm. Another point is, and Emanuel said this clearly, there's supposed to be a Jewish majority in this state, 2/3 mm-hmm. majority. Mm-hmm. And also, Emanuel didn't say, but I read on the website that the flag of this federation is supposed to be the present flag of Israel. Mm-hmm. And the national anthem is meant to be the present national anthem of Israel. Now, what all that means, and Emanuel didn't hide this, I'm not saying you hid something, God forbid. That means we're talking about an Israeli state. We're talking about a Jewish state. in which there is a Palestinian Arab minority.
Okay.
So after saying all that it's a Jewish state, we have the majority, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, clearly it's written on the website of Emanuel's organization that we want the Arabs to identify with the state. We want it to be a modern state in which they have full civil rights, and which they feel that it's theirs and they're part of it, they identify with. Their aspirations have to be satisfied. What I meant to say in all that is there's a tension here.
Yes.
There's another plan that's not on the table in this particular discussion tonight, and I don't know a lot about it. The other plan is called the one-state solution, in which we have a bi-national one state that belongs equally to Arabs and Jews. Emanuel didn't say that on purpose because he, like me, is a Zionist who wants a Jewish state. But the sense I have is we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. We want a Jewish state, but we want the Arabs to feel part of the state. We want it to be theirs also, but we mostly want it to be ours. So that's the tension I'm putting on the table.
Okay.
Bakasha.
Okay. First of all, you put it wonderfully. You really did. That's the tension. I think that what I said, first of all, I want to clarify one thing which we also don't hide. We're not presenting this as a joint Israeli-Palestinian or Jewish-Palestinian proposal, okay? This is an Israeli proposal. Now, the reason we do this is not because we don't think it should be presented as a joint proposal, but because we realize that the more I bring in Palestinians to this, okay, the more Jews will leave. This happens, this is the truth, okay? It's the truth. I'm sorry, okay? So we're walking a fine line here, what I can say is the following, that what is important to us, that the proposal shall be implementable, okay? There are aspects of this which are very, very problematic, even though we think it's implementable. The issue of what the state exactly is, and I didn't say it, what the state exactly is, it should be, in our view, it should be a civil state, okay, the state of Israel, and whoever is a citizen of that state is an Israeli citizen who belongs to the Israeli nationality, which will come into being with the creation of that federation. It will remain a Jewish state by virtue of the fact that the majority of the people are Jews, no other reason. There will be no other privilege to the Jews. The issue of the flags, when we get to the situation where you discuss the flags, of course we realize that if it's a joint Palestinian-Israeli state, it should be expressed also in the symbols of the state, okay? But for starters, okay, if we get to a situation where that's what we're haggling about, I'm very confident that we'll find a way, okay? So we're proposing what we're proposing in order to get over the sticker shock, okay? Because when we propose something which is basically a one-state approach, okay, to go all the way like Peter Beinart did, or he didn't actually propose anything specific, but he was in that area, okay. We'd like to be in an area where we can still connect to Zionist thinking, okay, because there's nothing in our proposal. There's absolutely nothing in our proposal that in any way contradicts the Declaration of Independence, okay? So there's just nothing there, okay? And we feel good about that. I've discussed the issue of the symbols with leading members of the Palestinian minority, actually Knesset members in Israel, and if we're talking about basically a state of all peoples, that will not be the main issue. That will not be a problem. So the tension is there. It has to be addressed. We're going to step over the line here and there. We're going to have to take some flack, but this is work in progress, okay? And we're not going to fix everything right now because we want other people to chip in also, okay? Because people may come up with some good ideas. And we've been showing this, of course, also to Palestinians, and the responses have been very positive all over.
Thank you. I'm going to read from some of the questions in the chat.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's see. let's start with Robin's point. So would this limit people from moving freely if the population of Canton is at a tipping point?
No, first of all, absolutely no. This is a normal country where everybody can live wherever he or she wants. They can cross from any canton to any canton and live in any canton in any canton. The starting point is that each canton has a large majority, something about 80% or at least 80%, either Palestinian or Jewish, in order to prevent a situation where the status of the majority status can be changed. Because there's a criticality, and I'm going to be very outspoken here. No offense. The way this, first of all, there's nothing nothing gerrymandering and nothing undemocratic about the way the cantons are set. The relation of the numbers of the cantons, 20 to 10, reflects exactly the demography of the country, okay? So there's no cheating there. What it means for the Palestinian, the main fear of the Jewish population is that the Palestinians will take over. Okay, they will have more babies. There's absolutely no reason that will happen, but that's what the fear is. Okay, the way this is set up, in order for the Palestinians to be able to change the status of the government, to change the nature of the country, they have to have both a majority in the lower house, which is population, and a majority in the upper house. In order to have a majority in the upper house, they have to have a majority in the cantons, which means they need 16 out of 30 cantons, which means they have to change the majority majority status of 6 Jewish cantons to Palestinian status. Now that's possible. There's nothing nothing preventing that. But by the time that happens, nobody will give a damn, excuse the language, who is in the majority. Okay, if that happens. Okay, so that's part of the governance system. Okay, I hope I've answered Robin's. Everybody can move anywhere. There's no problem. The borders between the cantons are administrative borders only. The only limitation is that people can only vote in one canton and the one where they're registered. Okay, so
thank you.
Okay.
As we go on with the questions, I just want to remind myself and remind Gideon and Emanuel that the questions can be answered by both of you.
Okay.
So the next question that I see here is from Micha. What would become of the Jewish right of return? So you hinted to that. Actually, you mentioned the Declaration of Independence. I think it does say that the country will be open to free Jewish immigration.
Yeah.
So what you said does a little bit contradict the Declaration of Independence.
So you're right. Actually, thank you, because I missed out on that one. First of all, what I suggested, what I thought could be the basis for an approach to set the right of return and the law of return aside, meaning not canceling them, setting them aside and putting into place a normal immigration policy, which would in fact result in whoever wants to immigrate can immigrate. Okay, that's the idea. So I'm not, nobody can think of canceling the right of the law of return. Definitely not the law of return. Even though it's not a particularly smart law, because to think that a Satmar Jew who doesn't want anything to hear about the state of Israel has more rights than a Palestinian who lives here, it doesn't make sense. But never mind. That's what the approach could be. It's something very difficult to talk about at this stage, and like I said, priorities to the situation on the ground for the people who live here right now.
Ruvain has a question. How can Jerusalem be a Jewish canton? The majority of the population being Jewish is not by a margin as significant as that of the other cantons, presumably.
Well,
let me finish. Plus, wouldn't most Palestinians reject this? Even the people, not just the leadership?
First of all, with regard to Jerusalem, most of the areas which are now included in Jerusalem are not part of Jerusalem. Okay, so there's a lot of villages and parts that just Israel decided to include many areas into Jerusalem, but they're not actually part of Jerusalem, and they would be part of the country. But that's not even an issue. Conceivably, I think this is also going to be a Jewish issue, because to think of Jerusalem not be a Jewish canton is a difficult thing, but it's also not going to be a practical issue. Practically speaking, there will be a canton of Jerusalem, which will likely be a Jewish majority canton. If not, it'll be different, but there has to be a compensation, because the number of cantons should reflect the balance of the population. With regard to the Palestinian population not supporting it, first of all, our problem is the Jewish population, not the Palestinian population. And I say that with confidence because, first of all, the number of Palestinians who are supporting one-state approaches is increasing as we speak all the time. It's not more than 50% at this time, but we don't need that much, because whoever will see this approach will connect to it. I'm pretty sure about that. And there's a chance, of course, that won't happen. Our main issue is with the Jewish population. And with the Jews, it's more on the leadership on the right connects. The right population, not so much. The left population connects. The leadership of the left population doesn't connect. It's a lot of work we have to do. We need a lot of support to do the work. We need a lot of publicity. Peter Beinart's article did a great job for us. He put the issue up into the media, and and people are going to be interested. But this is going to take a while. From all the conversations I've had with Palestinians, they are not the problem. We have to be careful here, because they are a very weakened population, and for them it's not difficult to get them to agree to something which gets them out of their misery. Okay, and this is obviously an approach which will get them out of their misery. And when they say yes, they say that, and maybe later they say, well, maybe on second thought. But since this approach will definitely improve the situation in a major way for everybody, in a big way, okay, I'm confident that we can make a case both to the Palestinian population and to the Jewish population.
Thank you. Gideon, I actually neglected what I planned to do, which was to give you an opportunity to ask Emanuel something, or to point out something you disagree, or present a different version of the federation solution. At this point, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, I will say a few words about Emanuel's presentation. Two things. I mean, first of all, the reason I actually spoke about federalism as a process and was kind of non-committal about a specific solution is precisely because I don't agree with Emanuel about the unilateral issue. A federal solution, I feel, cannot be realized without deep involvement, and deep involvement on both sides would mean it would have to be a joint effort that would be worked out over years. And that's when I talk about a process, I think it would take a generation for us to work it out, possibly less, but it's something that we would not be able to implement from above. I'm not sure I share the optimism about Palestinians not being the problem in that sense. I think that if we were to implement a federal solution that would just be dropped from above, I don't think it would work out any better than other unilateral things that have been done here in the past 10 years, or that are planned in the future, like the sovereignty plan. So I'm less optimistic about that. Another issue is Of course, the idea of Gaza not being included is very appealing in one sense. I just can't see how for me personally. I mean, that it's hard to work my way around the idea of what exactly is Gaza supposed to be. How is it? How is it supposed to work into the plan? Um, I can't see how we can really, as convenient as that may be to us as Israelis, that's to me that's difficult to work through. So that's something that I feel is problematic. Another thing I want to say is that I think the problem with the Canton solution is that any solution that is very dependent on a demographic balance is prone to a lot of danger. I mean, look at Lebanon, for example. Look at a country just north of a country that is based on balances, very specific balances between different ethnic communities. But the problem is demographics change. And if we are in a constant effort, especially if people are allowed to move around between cantons, if we are constantly in an effort of keeping a certain demographic balance between the 70% and the 30%, and within each canton, I think that's not the basis. You would have to have a stronger basis than that for a federal solution. In other words, the structure itself would have to hold more weight, so I think that would be very, very tricky, and that I think is kind of a problematic issue with the canton system. So those are my notes about Emanuel, for Emanuel in general. I think as far as the Palestinians are concerned, I will say one more comment, because I saw people asked if there are Palestinians who are interested in federal solutions. As far as I know, there are. I mean, we at least when we're talking about confederal solutions, that's a solution that I think there are quite a few Palestinians who are thinking in those terms already. We had some good discussions with General Isa Aburam of the IPCRI Center, who has promoted a solution in that vein. It's not exactly what it's more of kind of a two-state solution, but I think we are moving in that sense. I agree with Emanuel. I'm optimistic in the sense that I think we're moving. The whole region is moving toward in that direction, the direction of feeling that we will actually have to share rule to work towards a shared rule solution of some sort. So we have to keep that dialogue going. So I think that's enough. See if
I just want to address briefly the Gideon's words. First of all, regarding unilateral, first of all, I completely agree with that it cannot be unilateral. In any case, a federation cannot be unilateral, because the moment the population has to agree to be part of the federation or to agree on the constitution, it's put to a vote. It's as simple as that. Okay. What I mean is to put the process into motion. Okay. And regarding the timeline, I gave a presentation to Swiss tourists who came, and they asked me, how long do you think it's going to take to implement this? So I didn't have a clear idea. So I said, they take 10, 15 years. So they laughed at me. Okay, and they said this is going to take 50 years at least, which may not be such a bad thing, all things considered. Okay, but we have to keep in mind this is long term. Regarding Gaza, Gaza will be a separate Palestinian state. It's as simple as that. A city-state, which will have all the parts of a state. Okay, that's the concept. It has to be given all the support. And of course access and so on and so forth. Okay, that was the idea about Gaza. And regarding about the canton there'd be an issue of demography. There is no issue of demography. Once we have the state in place at whatever 60-40 or 67-33 and the number of cantons, it's completely stable. It's completely stable. The only issue left regarding demography, which has to be taken into consideration, is that of immigration. Okay, we cannot have a.
No, so what happens if a canton becomes an Arab majority or Jewish majority? I'm not
No,
sure.
I said like to change the status of an 80% Jewish majority canton into a Palestinian majority canton cannot happen overnight. Okay, this is some, you know, people move. Okay, they're not all going to move. Okay, people like to live with people of like their own. Okay, even now, I mean, nothing prevents Palestinians who live in the Galilee to move to Tel Aviv, but they don't. They like to live with Palestinians in the Galilee, and they like to work in Tel Aviv, so they go and they go back, okay? And that's going to be a similar situation. People are going to prefer to live with the likes of them. You know, I think one thing this will probably do, it'll take the nationality bug away from, you know, that they'll feel comfortable in their cantons, but they won't start breeding in order to get more than the other side. Yeah, I'm ready for more questions.
Okay, so the next point here, let's go to Ruvain. The Federation movement prefers bilateral or multilateral agreements, but is willing to act unilaterally if need be. However, the Federation movement also recognizes the need for international legitimacy and agreement from the international community.
Yes.
How can these two things possibly coexist? Doesn't the international community absolutely maintain the conflict must be resolved bilaterally?
Okay, this is actually I'm a realist. Okay, it's very simple. If you what we do is improves the situation and is according to law. Okay, they're going to go with it. You know, if you go now to the international community and say, listen, we have a plan. We don't want to continue with the occupation. We want to extend Israeli law, and everybody gets full rights, all included. So they're going to say, oh, are the Palestinians going to agree? We're going to put it to a vote. The Palestinian leadership may not agree. Okay, the Palestinian leadership hasn't agreed to anything almost at any stage along the way. They had good reasons not to agree many times, but they had plenty of reason also at times to challenge us, and they never did. And we cannot be in a situation where we are. I'm putting this in it's a little cynical, but we can't be put in a situation where we have to continue with the occupation, because the alternative that the European Union doesn't like that we do something unilaterally, which is a whole lot better, but we can't get an agreement. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. Okay, whatever we do, it'll be a lot better than what we're doing now. And if we're doing what we're doing is a lot better than what we're doing now, we're going to get a lot less flack than we're getting now. Okay. As is, nobody cares about the Palestinians other than us, and we don't care about them for the right reasons, but we at least care for them.
I'm going to go to Robert Corsini. Given the real-time failure of federalism going on in the United States of America today, how might this influence your thinking or vision for Israel-Palestine?
Okay, listen, I think Gideon discussed, he touched on it already. There's 27 federations running now, and there's countries that are in the process of federating. There's a lot of federations to look at to see what we should do, and there are also a lot of federations to look at and see what we should not do. And whatever we do, we have to create our own federation. I'm confident that the model is a good model. What parts of the federation model we shall adapt or not adapt, there's a lot of Jews and a lot of Palestinians who are going to have a lot of time to think about that. And I think it's a worthy vision to look forward to. It's a worthy project to work on, because it's all positive, it's uniting, it's saving a whole lot of money. We don't need to separate. Nobody has to move. One thing I forgot to mention, which is not a minor issue, nobody will have to move, neither settlers or people who live in the West Bank, nor Palestinians will have to move. Everybody can stay put. Okay, so I don't think we have to worry about it. I think America will hopefully solve its problems, which I'm not sure are completely problems of the federation, but rather other things. But
maybe I can add something on that question. Yeah, federalism. I mean, federal systems are prone to friction. That's true. That there is friction between the state and the federal government. But I would think about federalism as a mechanism where that friction can actually be lived in a constructive way. So actually, we have friction now, a lot of it, and the federal system is actually a way of agreeing where. So of course, federal systems have crisis. I mean, that's not to be denied. It happens in the United States. It happens elsewhere. But the point is that you have a mechanism in which that crisis that can be worked out. That's what we lack today. Today we have no such mechanism. We have friction between communities, and actually, when you think about the Trump plan, the map. As Emanuel said, I agree that as a state, that would be the Palestinian state would be completely unviable. But think about how that map, it really cries out federal solution. I mean, every kind, living that kind of map, implementing that kind of map would mean coordination on so many levels all the time. So that would actually, if that map were implemented, or a similar map, not important. In the framework of a federal solution, that could potentially work. The problem is when the borders are solid.
Yeah, exactly. That can't be. Next.
Next question is from Lisa. Going over things we've discussed a bit. If I heard you correctly, you said that if the leaders won't implement this, it should be implemented unilaterally. If that is correct and the leaders won't implement, what is the entity that will take the unilateral action you suggest?
Well, first of all, again, we don't want that, okay? But conceivably, first of all, Israel is the sovereign in the whole area, okay? We are in charge between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, which means we can pretty much call the shots, okay? And I mean that in every way. And and it's it's the truth, and we can make use of that force for a good cause, okay? And for a good cause would be to institute to let's say anyway the whole concept of the federation, as Gideon correctly said, this has to be a process and it has to be long term, and we cannot even if we go unilaterally, we can't say okay, we'll make now 10 Palestinian cantons, here we go. This has to be a slow process where, let's say, at certain stages, 3 cantons, 2 Jewish cantons, 1 Palestinian, come online, join the federation, and then another year or 2 later, another 2 or 3 cantons come online. So the idea would be to find a Palestinian area, one of the Palestinian cantons, and approach the leadership in that canton, the local leadership, assuming that the Palestinian Authority would not agree, and go through the process. Incidentally, in the Hebron area in the 90s, I think during the first government of Netanyahu, the clans from Hebron approached the Israeli government and they suggested that they should become a canton in some way associated with Israel. Okay, we rejected that at the time. So there is a basis for that. Again, unilateralism is not a good idea. Okay, but again, on the other hand, if we are already in charge and if we are running the show over the whole area, I think we should, this should not prevent us from doing good. And this is what I think instituting a democracy or a more democratic system is doing good.
Thank you. Daniel wants to ask a question orally. So Daniel, you can speak up.
Thank you. Daniel is of the oral persuasion. Hello, I'm a former Habonimnik from years ago. I was the Merkez Chinuch at Na'aleh, and before I ask my question, I just want to say it's really fortifying and moving to see these conversations happening It would have been anathema to even think of this back in the day. And I was on the left-wing fringe of a left-wing movement at the time, and got a lot of pushback from, people who held the line of where the goalpost is supposed to be. And I really appreciate the creative thinking that's going in, especially given, what the facts on the ground are now. And I can't tell if this question is way abstract or way practical. But it's about justice, and it's about truth and reconciliation. So you talked about apartheid, and I couldn't tell if you're using it somewhat euphemistically or like as a possible, eventual it could become apartheid. Well, there's plenty of Palestinians and plenty of Israelis and plenty of South Africans who'll tell you it's apartheid now. It's just not officially across the entire state apartheid. And so in the case of South Africa, there was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I heard the moderator speak about peace and reconciliation. But I live in Canada, and without truth, without two peoples coming to the table and saying, "Look, this is what happened," and somehow the power dynamics. I worry that the power dynamics would stay intact. That our side is still setting the framework because we are so loath to let go of our precious Jewish state idea. And I don't mean to belittle it. I understand the attachment to it. But on the other side, you have these other human beings who are the recipients of a settler colonial project. At least that's their experience of it. Who've been displaced, who've been subjected to the longest occupation on the planet. All kinds of horrors. And then on the other side of it, you've got these many generations of Israelis who have been traumatized by having to effectuate that occupation and also be at the receiving end of the violent resistance that's come, right? So you got these two peoples who are just carrying tons of trauma. And where in the model of federation, and maybe it's the same answer as with a one-state solution. I'm just curious to hear you speak about, like, in your vision of it, at what point are we going to sit down and be like, "Yo, tell me about what happened to you. Tell me about what I did to you."
First of all, I really appreciate the question, because I get carried away with being practical. I'm an engineer by training, and we'll do this and this and this and this and this will be fine. And you glance over what you just touched on. And I think reconciliation has to be part of the process. Okay, it has to be part of the process. The problem is, being a practical person, we're cutting a lot of corners, also in the presentation and also in the proposal. Okay, there are a lot of things which are not spelled out. Okay, and they're not spelled out not because we didn't think of them, or because we were aware that if we spell them out, we're going to get our ass kicked. Okay, and we don't want that at this stage. Okay, we want to put the thing on the floor as much as we can, with the corners cut. Okay, so
but do you worry that you're delaying the inevitable, because you're kind of kowtowing to bigotry, aren't you? Aren't you just saying, when they find out that what we want is justice and peace for these two peoples, they're going to freak out?
First of all, I'm confident that the public will draw us in. Okay, and I'm not going to say no, we won't talk about that. I answer all the questions. Okay, and this is public and this is recorded and it'll be available. So I'm fully in favor of reconciliation commissions, and there are examples from other areas of conflict. And I think there are a lot of good Jews who can work on that and should work on that. And it'll be one of the things will be to determine when is the time to come online with these things. Okay, and I think organizations like Roots can play a role in things like that, and should play a role, because there's a lot of NGOs who are working in the field who are actually already doing something, things along that line, but they don't have a political program around it. So, I'm all for it. It should be done. The sooner the better. And thank you for asking the question.
Gideon, do you want to relate to that?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think, as Emanuel said, I agree. I think that's where Roots comes in. I mean, that's what I see as the main purpose of Roots, is to discuss things on that level of reconciliation, bringing down barriers of fear and so on. A federal solution, in that sense, I would say, is really, would first of all, of course, be a mechanism for the practical side of reconciliation, which is justice concerning land and representation and water rights and all those things that are very, very important. I would say, at least not less important than the symbolic issue. I think for me, I'll add that, I'm a settler, and when I have conversations with Palestinian friends, it's very important for me for them to. I don't apologize. I feel that I'm here by right, not by some. I'm not taking it. We can talk a lot about the concepts, apartheid or not apartheid. That's a whole another. We can have another evening about that. How we came to this situation of separation, and it's actually very related to the issues we spoke about. Because the creation of the separation between these two populations is actually the process that was supposed to lead to two-state solution that just fell apart. So people tend to forget that the separation was not there before 1987, before the first Intifada. It came to be after the Oslo agreements. But so definitely the federal solution would be, the first step would be to understand that we actually live together. And there's no more reconciliation than that. The understanding that we are on this land together for good, I would say, is the first, and we're not there yet, to be honest. I mean, most of the people here between the Jordan and the sea are not there yet, in the sense that we still do not accept that basic fact that there is no way for us to divorce from each other. We have to live here together. So that, I would say, is the first requirement of reconciliation, and we can go on from there.
Okay.
Thank you,
We
Gideon.
got some more time?
We have some little bit more time.
Okay.
Sarah asks, are reparations part of the discussion? How can one combat the almost certain possibility of structural inequality between Jews and Arabs?
First of all, reparations as part of, should be part of any kind of arrangement. This is a very wide area. Okay, first of all, obviously, we're talking about reparations to Palestinians who were displaced, some kind of compensation. What we then legitimately the question is asked: what about Jews who were displaced from Arab countries? This is a far subject. Of course, it should be discussed. We don't have answers to and particular proposals. We have a particular proposal regarding the refugee issue, but also that is not locked in. It's not cast in stone, and still open to proposals. And what was the second part of the question? Oh, sorry.
The second part of the question was, how can one combat the almost certain possibility of structural inequality between Jews and Arabs?
Okay. First of all, there's structural inequality between Jews as well. The concept of a federal system makes it easier to address structural differences, and any cantonal system will be much better than a unitary system in spreading the wealth, because the cantons will have independence and will have a lot of autonomy to run their own systems and also to generate income. So that was the first thing. First of the system will, and in addition, there will be a compensation system that will redistribute the money from the rich cantons to the poorer cantons, which works very well in Switzerland, for example, where the difference between the rich cantons and the poor cantons is only 20%. So you can see that if you work, if you have a good system in place, you can do a good job at that. It'll take time, obviously. Putting those two economies, 10 to 1 together until they are anywhere close will take a lot of time, but there's a lot of incentive, and there'll be a lot of money available to do that.
Yeah, structural inequality, I agree with Emanuel, is going to be a problem. We see in Germany still the eastern provinces are still poor. It's still an issue, even if it's been 30 years after unification, and the differences there are not as great as they are here. So yes, it'll be an issue. That's going to be one of the problems we'll have to deal with. But the two-state solution will be even more unequal because a Palestinian state in any form will be weak and dominated without an apparatus to create equality. So I think that would be a much worse, at least in a federal solution. You have the option of some kind of apparatus that could deal with imbalance.
At this point, I have to ask the two panelists the question, are you willing to stay overtime? There's another 23 questions and we've reached 11 o'clock.
I have no problem. I'll be happy to stay on.
Gideon, what do you say? Could I present a few more questions?
What can I say? Okay, yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
So of course, anyone who has to leave will obviously leave without asking permission, but I'm gonna read a few more questions here. Leah asks, will anything distinguish Jerusalem from other cantons?
The only idea is that Jerusalem will be a city according to the borough system. So there were, every quarter will be a different borough, which is basically the canton system in small. Okay, Jerusalem would be a city of I don't know, 10, 12, 15 cantons, boroughs. Okay, so there will subdivisions of the city, but other than that, there won't be anything special. It will be the federal capital. Okay, that's and I didn't discuss the religious the places of religious importance. The area of Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount, and everything. Those will be federal areas. They will not belong to either the a Jewish canton or a Palestinian canton. Whichever religious areas that are located in the cantons will be federal areas and will be run by the religious authorities of whichever religion. And not by the nation, but by the nationality that is in that particular canton.
I would suggest I would differ here. I would suggest that Jerusalem should be very different than the other cantons because Jerusalem has to do with the symbolic element of identity that could actually bring both sides together. So I would say that Jerusalem should be, our rabbi here of Menachem Fruman suggested, the late Menachem Fruman suggested that Jerusalem be a city where there's no sovereignty, where it's divine sovereignty. That I don't know exactly how that would work, but I would say that if we're already thinking creatively, Jerusalem should be the cornerstone on which we have to base our shared identity here. And so I would think that would have to be reflected in the political structure as well, not just the federal capital, but also.
I can dig that. I think if you come up with a nice idea, we can incorporate that, and I think people would appreciate that. Yes.
There's another question. Do you have any plans for Palestinian involvement in the movement?
First of all, there is Palestinian involvement in the movement to the extent that we talk to Palestinians all the time, and we also publish. Video clips in Arabic to the Palestinian in the Palestinian which get to the Palestinian areas and have been watched by hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. So we are there. It's difficult for us to operate in the Palestinian territory, and right now there's again we concentrate on the verbally more on the Jewish audience. But this is work in progress, okay? It depends on how much money we will have available. Donations aren't at this time coming in at the rate which we need them. And in order to operate in Arabic in the Palestinian Authority, it'll be very difficult. We wanted to conduct a poll in the Palestinian Authority, and the pollster refused to accept a question which would include that Gaza is not part of the solution. So that was a very cute situation we had to deal with. In the end, we didn't do the poll, but it's not easy to operate there. But we do it, and again, the Palestinian people, the public has been very positive, very receptive. Of course, not everybody, but by and large, the echo has been very positive.
There's a question of Ben. Would cantons be similar to states or to congressional districts, to put it in U.S. terms?
No, I think the idea is that they're similar to states. They should, they should have their autonomy. The idea is that most of what is between the citizen and the state is conducted at the cantonal level. That only issues which have to do with defense and cross-country issues like environment and things like that should be not at the cantonal level. So the idea is, to keep the federal government lean and limited only to those things which really are for the whole country, and do everything else in the cantons, which is also a way of democratizing the whole country. Okay, in order to, because when your government is run by your next door neighbor, and replaced every 4 years, it's more of a democracy than it is right now. And it'll introduce regional elections in Israel, which is a very, very important step.
Do any of our two speakers have final words to close, or both of you if like?
You want to say something, Gideon?
No, I think we kind of we've covered it more or less. I mean, I think Emanuel and I, Emanuel kind of brought the more practical approach, and I'm not, and as I said, not provoking any particular solution, but I think that the more people turn towards the solution, I think that we can start building something, and I think that, as I said, Palestinians are also willing to work together with this. It's very difficult with the Palestinian Authority as it is today, but as I said, that's a different discussion.
I think our biggest challenge now is to politicize this proposal and to get a political party on board, so we get some political backing for a federal solution. I'm involved in some efforts in this regard. I don't know how fast that's going to move, but that'll be important, because right now, it's just not on the screen yet. So on the political screen, and without it being on the political screen, it won't come to fruition. So we have to work on that, and support from the U.S. Jewish community is highly encouraged.
Thank you very much, Emanuel. Thank you very much, Gideon. I think we really benefited a lot from this, a lot of thought-provoking information and insights. I'd remind everyone again that Roots is not a political organization. We have a political vision, but not a political plan. But we really do see ourselves as a forum for having these very important discussions, because when Roots says that we're not political, we're people to people, that doesn't mean that, in our opinion, politics is not important. Of course it's important, and the present situation which we're living is one of injustice and has to be corrected, but that requires, in our opinion, both work people to people and requires the political work and the political vision. So thank you to our political thinkers who are supplementing and complementing the work of Roots. Next week, our presenter Shadi Abu Awad, who is the founder, the Palestinian founder of the Roots Youth Movement. He was the original director of that movement. It was a very important part of the work of Roots on the ground. Shadi is the nephew of the Palestinian founder of Roots, Ali Abu Awad, and he is the son of the present Palestinian co-director of Roots, Khalid Abu Awad. And I can tell you that the family is a very talented family, and Shadi shares in that talent. He's a very good speaker, an insightful young man, perhaps a future leader of the Palestinian people, or at least a future leader of Roots. So next week, please join us to hear Shadi Abu Awad talking about Painful Hope, second generation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Gideon.
Bye-bye.
Who's going to be the last one with us?